Hi guys, this is Ms. Trejo, and I wanted to do a video because I know that some of you guys had questions on the Show What You Know Part 2, where it had a quadrant grid with fractions and decimals in the ordered pairs. So before I go into the graph, the coordinate grid, I wanted to first do a video with the fractions that they used and showing you what this fraction looks like in a picture model, in the number line, and the decimal form of the fraction. So here we have 1/4. So our bottom number is our denominator. So our denominator. And our top number is our numerator. Our bottom number, our denominator, tells us how many total pieces we have. So in this case, we have a total of 4 pieces. So for my picture model, I'm going to draw a rectangle and split it into 4 pieces, the total number of pieces that we have, which is our denominator. Now, they're supposed to be equal pieces, but as you can see, some of them are not equal. But it's okay. Let's just pretend that they're all equal pieces. Now, our numerator tells us how many pieces of this model we are using or we have, or it just depends on what the problem is saying. So in this case, I know that I only have 1 out of the 4 pieces. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to, give me a second. I'm going to come in and shade in 1 part. So now this model represents 1/4, or I have shaded 1/4 of this model. So this piece right here that is shaded represents 1/4. It's 1 out of the 4 pieces that we have in total. Now in a number line, let me do my number line. Okay, so I have my number line. Now I'm going to mark my beginning as 0 and my ending point as 1. So now I have to fill it in between. Now, remember I said that our denominator told us that we have 4 parts? Well, I know that I'm going to have to make 4 jumps in order to get to the 1. So 1 jump would be 1/4. If I make another jump, it would be 2/4. If I make a third jump, it would be 3/4. And lastly, my 4th jump, I would get into the 1. And I'm going to explain a little bit more about the 1 whole and 4/4 when we get to that fraction. So in this number line, if I make 1 jump and stop right there, this would represent the 1/4. Now, as a decimal form, the easiest way, guys, for you to remember the decimal forms of these fractions is by thinking about money, and specifically with quarters. So for example, if you ask your mom, your dad, or a sister, or brother, or a cousin for 1/4, how much would you have in total? Okay, we know that 1/4 is the same thing or is equivalent to 25 cents. So now, how many quarters do you need in total to make 1 whole dollar? Okay, I hope you answered 4 because you need 4 quarters to make 1 whole dollar, okay? So in this case, thinking about our quarters, if I think about it this way, I need 4 quarters, 1, 2, 3, 4, to make 1 whole. But if I only have 1 out of the 4 quarters, that means that I only have 25 cents or 25 hundredths. Therefore, 1/4 is the same thing as 25 hundredths. Okay, because think about it. You only have 1 out of the 4 quarters you need to have $1. So that means you only have 25 cents or 25 hundredths. Now, moving on to the next fraction, 2 out of 4. Now, in a picture model, I would have my rectangle. And remember, again, we said our denominator tells us how many pieces, total pieces we have. So I have 4, so I need to divide my model into 4 pieces. Now my numerator, my top number, tells me how many pieces I'm using or how many pieces I have or how many pieces I need. It just depends on the problem, guys. So I know that I have 2 out of 4, 2 out of the 4 pieces. So I'm going to come over here and shade in 2 parts, 2 equal parts, because these are all supposed to be equal pieces. So now, I know that this shaded part, these 2 shaded pieces represent 2/4. But is there another observation that you can make with the shaded parts and the unshaded parts? All right, guys. So one thing that you can see or an observation you can make is that we have a total of 2 pieces that are shaded, and we also have a total of 2 pieces that are unshaded. So the amount of pieces that are shaded and unshaded are equal. That means that half of this model is shaded. So that also tells me that 2/4 is the same thing as 1/2. And let me show you a different way as to why 2/4 is the same thing as 1/2. Because we can simplify this fraction. So if I want to simplify this fraction, 2/4, I need to find, guys, the greatest common factor. So what does that mean, factor? I need to see what factors or what numbers can I multiply in order to get 2 and 4. So I know that 2 is the only even number that is a prime. So that means that I can only multiply the number 2 by 1. So 2 and 1 are the factors that if I multiply will give me 2. Because 2 times 1 equals 2, guys. Okay? Now, what factors or what numbers can I multiply to get 4? Well, I know that I can multiply 4 times 1. And I also know that I can multiply 2 times 2. And I'm not going to write 2 again because it's the same number. So now, these are the only factors for both of these numbers, 2 and 4. Now that I have my numbers listed in my T-chart or in my chart, I need to find the greatest or the biggest the largest number that they have in common, the greatest common factor. Now, I know that they both have 1 as a factor in common, but it is not the greatest. They don't have 4. They don't both have 4, so that can't be my answer. So I am left with 2. So I'm going to circle 2. My greatest common factor equals to 2. Now that I've found my greatest common factor, I'm going to divide my numerator by 2. And whatever you do to the top, you have to do to the bottom. So I'm going to divide both of these numbers by 2. And that's going to give me a new fraction. So how many times can I take 2 pieces out of 2? So 2 divided by 2, that's just 1, because 1 times 2 gives me 2. And if I subtract them, I'm left with 0. So 2 divided by 2 equals to 1. Now, 4 divided by 2. How many times can I take 2 pieces out of 4? Well, 4 divided by 2. I know that in the times table, it's 2, 4. So 1, 2, 2 times. And 2 times 2 gives me 4, and I am left with no remainders. So 4 divided by 2, 4 divided by 2 is 2. So 2 over 4, or 2/4, is the same thing, guys, as 1/2. As we see here when we simplified it, or as we see here in our model. So I'm going to go ahead, and on the top, I'm going to write 2/4, the same thing as 1/2. Alrighty? Okay. So now, for our number line. In a number line, again, I'm going to start with 0. And my ending point is going to be 1 whole. So I know that 2/4, or 1/2, is halfway. So I'll be halfway between the 0 and the 1. So I'm going to write 2/4 or 1/2, because it's the same thing. So now I know that here I need my 1/4, and over here I need my 2/3. So how many jumps would I make in order to get to 2/4 or 1/2? 1, 2. 2 jumps. Now, what is 1/2 or 2/4 as a decimal form? So now remember how I told you guys to think about quarters. Now, if you have 1/4, or 1 out of the 4 quarters that you need to make 1 whole, or $1, that means you only have 25 cents. But now in this case, you have 2 out of the 4 quarters you need. So if you have 2 quarters, how much do you have in total? Alrighty, guys, you're correct. You have 50 cents, or 50 hundredths. So 2/4 is the same thing as 50 hundredths, and 50 hundredths is the same thing as 2/4, or 1/2. So if you have 50 hundredths, or 2 out of the 4 quarters you need, you have half of $1.